The bull had the Frisbee in his mouth. Karen was screaming at a pitch that peeled paint off the barn, and I was sipping lemonade on my porch, trying to decide if I should charge admission or just start filming sequels. If you'd told me a week ago that my ranch would become ground zero for a suburban turf war led by women in matching yoga pants and false entitlement, I'd have laughed, tipped my hat, and gone back to fixing the damn barn roof. But here we are. And now I have just one question. Where would you draw the line between your land and your patience? It all started the previous Sunday, a morning so still it felt like God was holding his breath. The sun hadn't even crested fully over the eastern hills, and already I was up, coffee in hand, boots laced, soaking in that rare, unbothered silence. The kind of silence that smells like cut hay and feels like you've earned it. That peace didn't last. A thunderous, synchronized slam shattered it, the unmistakable chorus of SUV doors shutting in perfect suburban rhythm. From the porch, I counted 5 of them. Beige, champagne, off-white, pearl, and whatever shade of metallic delusion people buy when they want to feel unique, but end up matching every other HOA member in a 5-mile radius. They lined up like a car dealership protest against originality, hugging my northern fence like they own the view. I squinted into the morning glare. My gate was open. Not unlocked. Open. That gate hadn't been touched in weeks, and it sure as hell wasn't me who swung it wide. My boots crunched on the gravel path as I headed down, already drafting a speech that started with "you're trespassing" and ended with something involving sheriff deputies and formal charges. But nothing, not years of rural patience, nor a deep-seated belief in human stupidity, could have prepared me for what I saw next. Karen Whitmore, HOA president, self-appointed queen of beige morality, stood in the middle of my alfalfa field spinning like a toddler on a sugar high, hurling a bright yellow Frisbee into the wind like she was auditioning for a cereal commercial. "Run, Sharon," she squealed, pointing at her friend who dashed after the disc in pink sneakers that glowed like radioactive marshmallows. I stopped cold, halfway convinced I was witnessing a mirage. Maybe a heatstroke hallucination brought on by last night's bourbon. But no, it was real. The kind of real that makes your left eye twitch. "Karen," I called out, my voice dry enough to spark a brush fire. I wasn't aware my private pasture had been added to the HOA's recreational activity calendar. She turned, smile plastered across her face like it had been ironed on at birth, and responded in that overly rehearsed sing-song voice that made my spine itch. "Oh, Jake," she chirped, as if we were neighbors in a sitcom, "we just needed some open space for a little friendly exercise. You have so much land. And it's such a beautiful morning. There are moments in life when you realize the universe is testing you. This was mine." I walked closer, jaw clenched tight enough to snap a fence post in half. "It's a ranch, Karen. That field is where I feed my livestock. It's also, let me remind you, behind a locked gate." She blinked innocently. "Oh, was it locked?" she asked with a tilt of her head and a smile so fake it could have been factory issued. "Well, it was open when we got here. Must have blown open. Right. And my cows probably moonlight as locksmiths." At that exact moment, the Frisbee hit the side of my tractor with a soft thunk, then flopped into the dirt like a dying jellyfish. That tractor cost more than Karen's entire wardrobe, SUV included. I felt a twitch in my temple, the kind that comes right before regrettable decisions. "Listen," I said slowly, carefully, like I was disarming a bomb. "I'm trying to be neighborly here. But if you want to play Frisbee, take it to a park. You're trespassing." She pouted, folding her arms in mock hurt. "Jake, you're being so territorial. The HOA charter allows shared access to non-commercial green space." I took a long breath. "Except, Karen, I'm not in the HOA. I refused. Remember that vote 5 years ago? You brought muffins." Her smile faltered for a split second, like a faulty wire sparked behind her eyes. "Well, you're adjacent to the HOA. That makes you influenced by community accessibility standards." My eyebrows raised. "Karen, that's like saying you can use someone's bathroom because you breathe the same air. This is my land. Not a suggestion. Not a gray area. Just mine." Behind her, a crowd had gathered. 8 women, all in branded athleisure, holding BPA-free water bottles like they were on a spiritual retreat in Loyalmanville. One wore a visor so big it looked like a satellite dish. Another had a Bluetooth speaker strapped to her waist, blaring light jazz into the morning. They giggled like children trespassing in a candy store, oblivious to the very real, very territorial animal that could be watching them from just beyond the tree line. I had options. I could call the sheriff. Again. I could post another sign. Again. I could install barbed wire and surveillance drones and motion-activated sprinklers. Or, I looked south toward the paddock, I could open a different gate. One that led to a 2,000-pound solution named Buster. You need to understand something about Buster. He isn't just a bull. He's a legend. Raised from a bottle after his mama rejected him, Buster grew up around humans, but never liked them much. Smart as a whip, mean as a snake if you cross him, and with a vendetta against anything round and airborne. That hatred began 2 summers ago when a kid's drone dive-bombed his hay pile, and a flying pizza box followed a week later. Since then, anything circular that moves through the air might as well be a hostile aircraft. Buster didn't forget. Buster didn't forgive. I said nothing more. Just turned and walked back to the porch. Karen probably thought I was sulking, maybe drafting another strongly worded email. What I was really doing was pulling up the pasture cam on my phone, watching her group like a hawk studies a rabbit that hasn't yet heard the flap of wings overhead. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not out of anger. Not even out of worry. But anticipation. Because the next move? It wasn't mine. I'd set the board. Now it was time to let the game play out. And wouldn't you know it, come Monday morning, the beige herd returned. What would you have done next, standing on your porch with a lemonade in hand, watching the boundary between private property and social delusion melt under the morning sun? Because I knew exactly what I was going to do. And the gate? It was already open. Buster didn't charge like a storm. That would have been too crude for his style. No, he moved with purpose. Deliberate. Measured. Like a heavyweight prizefighter entering a ring he'd already won in his head. The first step he took onto the field sent a flock of crows into the air like black confetti, startled by his presence. The second step silenced the Bluetooth jazz still warbling from Sharon's fanny pack. And the third, it brought every single yoga-clad trespasser to a standstill. Karen saw him too late. I knew that because her face hadn't changed yet. She was still smiling, mid-joke with someone holding a collapsible chair, as if this was a community picnic and not the calm before a bovine hurricane. I didn't yell. Didn't wave my arms. I just stood on the porch and watched. I was curious, honestly. Curious to see what happens when entitlement meets instinct. When a perfectly curated suburban fantasy collides with 2,000 pounds of raw, horned reality. The Frisbee arced through the sky like a golden omen, spinning, shimmering, and then Buster locked onto it. You ever seen an animal decide something? Not guess. Not react. Decide. That was Buster. He picked his target, drew an invisible line from his hooves to the plastic disc, and went. It was not graceful. It was not cinematic. It was violent intention in motion, the earth responding to him like it owed him respect. Women screamed. 2 bolted immediately, abandoning their yoga mats and emotional support water bottles. 1 fell over a mini speaker and rolled in the grass like a grounded drone. But Karen held her ground. For exactly 3 seconds. I'll give her credit. Most people would have screamed and run by the second hoofbeat. She stood tall, fists clenched, a look of determination carved into her Botox-smooth face. It lasted until Buster's snort hit her ears. Not just a grunt, this was a full-body announcement, a blast of compressed wind and warning, the kind of sound that says, "You are not welcome here." That's when she cracked, turned, ran, and not with dignity, with panic. Her arms flailed. She kicked her own shoe off in the sprint. Screamed a name. I think it was Sharon's, but nobody was listening anymore. The herd had scattered. The field, once a playground of self-assurance and imagined permission, was now chaos incarnate. And through the middle of it all thundered Buster, who didn't touch a soul. That's the part people miss when they retell the story later. He didn't charge anyone. Didn't gore or stomp or trample. He simply occupied, took the space that belonged to him, and made it so undeniable that no one dared challenge it. He intercepted the Frisbee midair, jaws snapping shut around it with a precision that made me choke on my lemonade. And then, like a dog with a prize bone, he trotted off toward the oak tree by the fence, tail swishing in satisfaction. For a moment, the world paused. Dust settled. The SUV sat silent, some with doors still flung open. A single water bottle lay in the dirt, monogrammed with a golden K and the image of a lotus flower. Buster dropped the Frisbee at the tree's base and began chewing it to plastic confetti. I swear he glanced at me. Might have even winked. But the best part wasn't the chaos, or even the fact that no laws were broken. It was what came next. Because someone, God bless their voyeuristic heart, had filmed the entire thing. From the moment Buster entered frame to the glorious, high-pitched crescendo of Karen's scream, it was all caught on video. 37 seconds. Shaky camera. Horrible lighting. But absolute viral gold. By noon, it was on the internet. By 3, it had a soundtrack. Someone had layered in dramatic orchestral music, complete with slow-motion effects and sepia-toned flashbacks of the Frisbee's journey. Comments flooded in. Justice Bull. Bovines against HOA tyranny. Memes popped up. Buster's face photoshopped onto superhero posters. A trending hashtag, #let the bull play. My phone buzzed nonstop. News anchors called. One YouTuber wanted to license the footage for a documentary on land rights in post-suburban America. I didn't answer. I sat on my porch and drank my second lemonade, listening to Buster chew. That evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the pasture gold, a familiar engine rumbled up the drive. I knew it was Karen before the SUV even stopped. She emerged like a hurricane pretending to be a breeze. Face flushed, hair frazzled, makeup smeared just enough to betray the effort she'd put into looking effortless. Her joggers bore grass stains. Her HOA lanyard flapped in the wind like a white flag no one asked for. "You set me up," she said. No greeting. No preamble. Just accusation, hot and sour like bad soup. I sipped my lemonade and leaned against the porch post. "Set you up? Karen, you brought a party to my field. My livestock's field. And then you acted surprised when livestock." "Did what livestock do?" She pointed one trembling finger toward the southern paddock. "You released him. You knew what would happen. That's negligence. That's animal assault." "He lives there," I said calmly. "That's his home. You're the one who broke in." Her mouth opened and closed like she was waiting for a script that never arrived. Finally, she found her words. "This isn't over." "Didn't think it was," I replied, nodding toward the pasture. Buster was asleep by now, the remains of the Frisbee beside him like a tiny yellow tombstone. "But next time you bring friends to play on private land, maybe check who the real homeowner is." She left in silence, which was the most satisfying part. No threats, no speeches. Just the sound of tires crunching gravel as she drove off like she'd just survived an apocalypse and wasn't quite sure what world she'd landed in. But I knew Karen. The kind of person who folds when the camera's on but rallies behind emails and bylaws. She wasn't done. Not by a long shot. And I wasn't worried. I had Buster. I had video. I had truth. And truth, when paired with a pissed-off bull and a perfectly timed camera angle, was a hell of a defense. The question now wasn't whether Karen would come back. She would. The question was how far she'd go to reclaim the illusion of control. And how many more Frisbees would need to die in the process. The letter arrived the next morning, not by postman but taped to my mailbox in a plastic sheet protector, like it was the Declaration of Independence. Karen's handwriting was unmistakable, rounded, overly neat, the kind of script people use when they're trying to look both legal and warm at the same time. The HOA emblem stamped in the top right corner was crooked, like even the printer had doubts. I pulled it down, peeled open the plastic, and read. According to the HOA Safety and Recreation Subcommittee, which I reminded myself I had never, not once, voted for, my bull Buster was now officially classified as a roaming hazard and disruptive attraction. The letter demanded that I keep him leashed or fenced at a minimum 6-foot barrier during daylight hours to prevent further, unintended engagements with community members. It used words like volatile livestock and atmosphere of intimidation. I laughed so hard I dropped the letter into my coffee. After fishing it out and hanging it to dry on the clothesline next to my flannel shirts, I made a copy, framed it, and hung it in my barn bathroom, right next to the one about the time I was fined for unauthorized rooster noise at dawn. That too had been Karen's doing. This wasn't her first act of overreach. It was just her most viral. What she hadn't accounted for was how quickly the neighborhood would split over it. Within 72 hours, the HOA was divided like a pie at a passive-aggressive Thanksgiving. One half rallied around Karen, mostly the pearl-clutching older crowd who still resented that my land wasn't zoned into their master-planned vision of wine nights and weedless lawns. The other half, the ones with kids, dogs, and a sense of humor, openly mocked the entire affair. Someone even made custom lawn signs. One read, "We stand with the bull," in bold red letters next to a drawing of Buster in aviator sunglasses. Another, spotted on Elmwood Drive, said "Let the bull play," underlined in glitter glue. I started getting letters. Not official ones, real ones. Slipped into my mailbox, under my truck windshield, even left in a basket of eggs on my porch. Notes of support, jokes, poems, one hand-drawn comic that featured Buster in a cape saving the neighborhood from HOA tyranny. The community wasn't just watching, they were picking sides. And Buster, it seemed, had become something more than just a bull. He was now a symbol, a mascot, a bovine vigilante defending rural sanity in the face of beige authoritarianism. So I did what any reasonable man would do in 2025. I made him a fan page. With help from my niece, who had more TikTok followers than the local newspaper had readers, we launched Buster the Bull, defender of ranch rights. The first post was simple, a close-up of Buster, head tilted slightly, chewing a mangled Frisbee with absolute contentment. Caption: "Private property means keep your flying toys to yourself." It blew up. Within hours, the page had thousands of followers. Comments ranged from "He's a hero" to "I wish Buster was our mayor." One woman mailed him a cowboy hat. A local animal clinic offered to sponsor his feed. A brewery from 2 towns over created a limited edition beer called Bull-Headed IPA, with a cartoon of Buster stomping on HOA documents. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down. She scheduled a community unity Frisbee festival on her front lawn. I could see the tents from my barn. Bright canopies, folding tables, a speaker system piping instrumental Coldplay. She even commissioned cookies from a local bakery, sugar-coated, HOA logoed, with little bulls crossed out in red icing. I wasn't offended. If anything, I admired the dedication. It's not easy to wage psychological warfare with baked goods. But I wasn't done either. While she rallied support with passive-aggressive pastries, I was collecting data. Screenshots of her posts. Snippets from the HOA newsletter. Flyers for the unauthorized community athletics she'd organized without permits. And I was forwarding them all to my cousin Dave, a part-time attorney, full-time petty warlord, and the only man I trusted to turn this circus into a courtroom comedy. Dave once sued a smoothie bar for false advertising because their natural mango drink contained artificial peach flavoring. He'd salivated when I told him Karen had tried to classify my bull as a weapon. "This is going to be fun," he said, already digging through county land use laws and HOA overreach case studies. While Dave assembled his legal attack, I played defense with style. I ordered a wooden sign for the front gate. Warning, emotional support bull on premises. May react poorly to Frisbees and fascism. That sign became an Instagram hotspot. Teenagers snuck onto the edge of the property just to take selfies with it. One family brought a drone to film Buster lounging. He headbutted out of the sky. The video got 10 million views. Karen, of course, escalated again. She introduced a motion at the next HOA meeting. A proposed ordinance requiring all large animals within a 1-mile radius of the HOA boundary to be secured behind reinforced fencing or relocated. She called it Operation Tranquil Pastures. It sounded like a yoga retreat for traumatized llamas. It bombed. Half the board laughed during her presentation. Greg Mitchell, the treasurer who wore mismatched socks and built birdhouses in his spare time, whispered, "Is this real?" into his hot mic. The room erupted. Karen didn't flinch. She pivoted to Plan C. The next morning, I saw a zoning inspector at the edge of my property. Clipboard, vest, boots, the whole county official cosplay. And standing beside him was Karen, gesturing like a flight director waving in a burning plane. She was trying to get my land reclassified as a public hazard. I stormed out, fully prepared to argue my case in sweatpants. But then I recognized the inspector. Leslie Hart. We went to high school together. She once broke a guy's nose for mocking her prize goat at the county fair. "Jake Colton," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Still causing chaos?" "Only on land I own," I replied. Karen blinked. "You two know each other?" Leslie smiled. "Oh, I know this ranch. Been here." His bull's registered. Fencing's legal. Signage is clear. Karen launched into a performance, complete with dramatic hand motions and a claim that Buster nearly gored her in the spirit. Leslie listened politely for 10 minutes. Then, without looking up from her clipboard, she said, "This is a personal vendetta dressed up as public concern. Case closed." Karen sputtered. But, he made the bull attack." Leslie replied, "Or maybe the bull responded to a group of uninvited strangers throwing neon objects in his grazing field." With that, she left. No citations. No warnings. Just a final nod to me. "Tell Buster he's got fans in the zoning department." That afternoon, I updated the fan page with a photo of Buster beside the rejected HOA ordinance, captioned, "Bureaucracy defeated." Again, I didn't hear from Karen for 3 days. Not a word. Not a whisper. Which, in her language, meant a storm was coming. And sure enough, when it did, it wasn't a zoning call. It wasn't a letter. It was a new sign. Big. Professionally printed. Planted in the empty plot behind her backyard, right up against my fence. "Coming soon, Zen Zone Yoga Studio. Relaxation with a view." The clip art showed a meditating woman facing a field that looked suspiciously like mine. She couldn't control my land. So now she decided to profit from it. I didn't blink. Didn't call. Didn't shout. I just smiled, walked inside, opened the county records, and discovered the lot, hers apparently, was still listed as pending sale. By 4 p.m., I was at the clerk's office. By 5, the deed was in my name. And by sunrise, her sign had a neighbor. Mine. Painted wood. Deep red letters. "Coming soon. Buster's Coop and Crow Cafe. Loud roosters. No yoga." She took her sign down by noon. The war was still going. But I'd taken the high ground. And this time I owned it, literally. Karen didn't come storming back this time. No furious emails. No surprise HOA meetings. No weaponized pastries. She simply vanished, at least for a while. The air around the neighborhood felt different, like after a summer storm, charged but quiet. That quiet held for nearly a week. It gave the illusion that the dust had settled, that perhaps Karen had finally accepted defeat, that maybe she was busy repotting succulents or alphabetizing bylaws. But I knew better. Karen wasn't the kind of woman who disappeared. She recalibrated. When her SUV reappeared in front of my property, it didn't screech to a halt like before. It rolled in silent, deliberate. She stepped out dressed not in HOA khakis or her usual suburban armor, but in business casual linen and oversized sunglasses. The kind of outfit that says, "I'm calm. I've moved on." but I'm also plotting 3 moves ahead. In her hands wasn't a clipboard, but a small box, white with gold trim, topped with a bow. She walked up to the gate and, without a word, set it down on the fence post. Then she left. No glance back. No passive-aggressive wave. Just tires on gravel and the faint smell of lavender and threat. The box, upon inspection, contained a handwritten letter and a steakhouse gift card. The letter was an apology. Real cursive, not printed. Neat but not rehearsed. She apologized for trespassing, for the zoning stunt, for misunderstandings involving airborne objects and grazing rights. She even mentioned Buster by name. Said she hoped he could one day forgive her, and that the steakhouse voucher could be his peace offering. My first instinct was to burn the letter and let Buster stomp on the ashes. But something about it felt off. Not dishonest. Just incomplete. Like she was pulling back only because she had something else in motion. I didn't have to wait long to find out what. 2 weeks later, I spotted construction markers near the back edge of her property. Orange flags. Wooden stakes. A portable restroom. Not the signs of someone giving up. The signs of someone regrouping. I grabbed my binoculars. The cleared plot wasn't the same one she tried to buy. It was part of her own yard. She hadn't abandoned her plan. She'd adjusted it. The new sign went up the next morning. Sleek, professional. Zen Zone Yoga Studio coming soon. Peace, posture, perspective. Beneath the tagline, a peaceful silhouette meditated in front of a digitally enhanced version of my ranch. Sunset sky, grazing animals, rolling hills. She had filtered reality until it looked like a spa brochure, then decided to build a business around it. I stared at the sign for a long time. Not angry. Not even annoyed. Just amused. If she couldn't conquer the ranch, she'd try to commodify it. She'd turn my field into a backdrop for her enlightenment. A kind of spiritual colonialism with incense. But she had miscalculated one thing. The fence was still mine. And I had a plan. I spent that afternoon drawing up a new design for a sign of my own. This one bigger, taller, and painted in the loudest shade of barn red I could find. The next morning, I installed it facing her studio plot. Bold letters. Buster's Coop and Crow Cafe, fresh eggs, roosters at dawn, absolutely no yoga. I didn't stop there. I set up a little stand next to it. A chalkboard sign offered eggs for sale, even though I didn't have chickens. Yet, Buster stood beside it like an unbothered mascot, chewing hay and occasionally snorting when cars slowed to look. The neighborhood erupted again. Kids laughed. Teenagers posted photos. One local influencer filmed a mock commercial in front of the sign. Karen, true to form, didn't respond. Not with words. But one afternoon, a banner appeared across her fence. Private property, no trespassing, no filming. She wasn't just trying to create her sanctuary now. She was trying to control the narrative around it. Too late. The story had already escaped her grasp. Buster's fan page had gone global. Animal Pages reposted his photos. A t-shirt company asked for licensing rights. Even a group of law students cited his case in a paper about property rights and viral social movements. I didn't feed the fire. I just kept living. I added 3 hens to the pasture. Named them Justice, Liberty, and Karen. The real Karen noticed. One morning, I saw her at the edge of the fence line, arms crossed, just watching. She didn't speak. Just stared at the chickens pecking in the dirt while Buster lounged nearby. Then she walked away. A few days later, she was back. This time at a distance, standing near the sidewalk as I was restocking the egg stand with wooden props. I nodded. She gave a hesitant wave. No words. Just that awkward, I don't know if we're at war anymore gesture. Then she turned and left again. That weekend, I hosted a small barbecue. Just a few neighbors, lawn chairs, ribs. Nothing fancy. I placed a temporary Frisbee zone at the far end of the pasture, well marked, with a sign. Play at your own risk, bull has priorities. People came. People laughed. Buster posed for photos like he knew he was famous. And then I saw her. Karen. Standing just outside the fence, watching. No clipboard. No entourage. No sign of her old queen bee presence. Just a woman in sunglasses and a sun hat, looking less like a general and more like a bystander. I opened the gate. Didn't say anything. Just held it. She hesitated. Then stepped through. For an hour, she didn't speak much. Walked slow. Took a rib from the table. Even chuckled when Buster nudged a cooler and nearly knocked over the lemonade. There were no big declarations. No speeches. Just the sound of conversation and kids playing, and for the first time in months, peace. As the sun dipped below the hills, casting gold across the pasture, she stood next to me by the fence. You're not going to open that cafe, she said quietly. Probably not, I replied. But it's good advertising. She nodded. You know, I didn't hate the attention. At first. But somewhere along the way, I forgot it wasn't my story. I looked at her. For a brief second, she looked tired. Not defeated. Not humiliated. Just human. Everyone loves the bull, she added. He doesn't even try. He just is. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Some truths don't need comment. She turned to leave. I didn't stop her. No final jab. No sarcastic wave. Just silence. The kind that didn't demand an ending. That night, the ranch was quiet again. The chickens were in their coop. Buster stood alone under the oak, nudging an old Frisbee with his horn. He tossed it once, watched it land, then looked at me. I picked it up, gave it a lazy throw. He trotted after it like it was the most natural thing in the world. Maybe it was. Maybe revenge, in its truest form, wasn't fire or fury or getting the last word. Maybe it was just peace. Real, inconvenient, unpolished peace. The kind that no HOA can ever legislate. And no yoga studio can fake. The weeks that followed passed with a kind of eerie calm. Not fake calm, not the simmering kind you get before a neighborhood HOA coup, but the real, unsettling quiet of people not knowing which version of each other would show up next. The weekly flyers that used to land on my doorstep with the passive aggressiveness of glittered judgment had stopped. The HOA Facebook group, once a digital town square of complaints about weeds, noisy pets, and lawn ornament violations, went silent. Karen hadn't posted a meme, a notice, or a prayer request for civic order in nearly a month. It was almost suspiciously peaceful, like the neighborhood itself had entered a cooling-off period. But Karen wasn't gone. Not entirely. Like an outdated garden gnome everyone forgets to throw away, she lingered. I saw her a few times walking her dog, a small Pomeranian with a mean streak and a rhinestone collar, never on my side of the fence, but always just within sight. No clipboard, no scowl, just vague acknowledgement, like two retired chess players who once nearly burned the table down over a pawn. Then one morning, something changed. I was loading feed bags into the truck when I saw her across the street. She waved. Not a sarcastic wave. Not a forced, we're all neighbors wave. Just a casual, open-palmed morning wave. And that, more than any HOA letter or zoning attempt, shook me. I almost dropped a 50-pound sack of corn. It was the social equivalent of a cat barking. I waited for the follow-up email, the apology, the hidden threat disguised as a holiday greeting. But what arrived next wasn't digital. It was hand-delivered. By an actual courier. A young guy in a brown polo shirt who asked for my signature, then handed me an envelope with gold edges and embossed lettering. Inside, a single page. Another letter. Another olive branch. This time it didn't just apologize, it confessed. Karen wrote that she'd realized something in recent weeks, that power used without reflection becomes tyranny. That she'd confused leadership with control. She even thanked me, for reminding her that people who live differently aren't automatically wrong. The kicker? A second voucher. Not a steakhouse this time. A gardening store. The handwriting was steadier now, less forced. She mentioned the Coop and Crow Cafe sign. Said it made her laugh. And that maybe, just maybe, she deserved to be laughed at. I didn't trust it, but I didn't ignore it either. Sometimes, even a snake sheds a skin it doesn't need anymore. 2 days later, the final act of her transformation arrived. A grand reopening banner hung on her fence, not for the Zen Zone yoga studio, which never materialized, but for something new. Karen's Corner Tea and Plants neighborhood welcome. Below it, a painted cartoon of a smiling sunflower holding a cup of chamomile. I blinked at it for a long time, unsure if it was a trap, a hallucination, or the beginning of a whole new brand of madness. But the plot had indeed changed. The construction area had been cleared out. A small shed had been converted into a tea shack, surrounded by potted herbs and lawn chairs in bright, non-HOA approved colors. She was trying something different now. Not conquering, not declaring, just offering. People showed up. Not many, but enough. Curious neighbors, unsure of her angle, sipping lukewarm tea while inspecting basil plants. Some stayed. Some bought honey sticks. One kid asked if Buster would ever visit. Karen didn't flinch. She smiled and said, "He's always invited, as long as he doesn't eat the signage." That evening, I hosted another gathering. More barbecue, more chairs, fewer cameras. I marked off the pasture again, this time not just with cones, but with little flags that read Bull Zone, proceed with humor. Buster was brushed and glistening, posed near the fence like a seasoned show animal with a grudge. Greg from the HOA showed up in a novelty shirt that said, "My HOA went viral, and all I got was this t-shirt." He brought cookies. Not anti-bull ones. Just oatmeal raisin. Progress. Halfway through the afternoon, I noticed Karen. Standing just past the gravel road, watching. She wasn't wearing anything official. No logo pins. No layered necklaces that jingled when she argued. Just jeans, sneakers, and a cotton t-shirt with a faded print of daisies. I walked over, leaned on the fence, and nodded. She didn't speak at first. Then she said, "You know, I really thought I was the protagonist." "You weren't the villain," I replied. "Not the hero either," she added. "Maybe just the interruption." We stood in silence. Not the awkward kind. The kind that says maybe we've both said enough. Then she asked, Do you still think about building that cafe? I smiled. Only when I want to annoy you in theory. In practice, I'd need chickens that lay on command and a bull that doesn't eat signage. She laughed. A real laugh. Not a pitch-perfect Karen laugh. A tired, slightly wheezy human laugh. She turned to leave, then paused. Let me know if you ever do it. I make a decent lemon loaf. And I'm learning to listen better. As she walked back toward her yard, I realized something. Karen didn't just lose her title. She lost the illusion that had built it. And in its place, maybe, just maybe, there was a person trying to learn how to exist without a rulebook. The sun dipped low again, bathing the field in amber. Buster snorted once, tossed an old Frisbee toward the tree, and settled down like he owned the world. The kids ran by with sticks, pretending to joust invisible HOA knights. The tea shack stayed lit long after sunset. And somewhere, deep down, I began to believe that maybe this was it. The real ending. Not a courtroom battle. Not a final vote. Just this, neighbors talking again, laughing again, tolerating each other's weirdness again. Maybe she'd snap one day. Maybe the HOA would re-elect her out of boredom. Maybe she'd return with a new name, new bylaws, and a vengeance-powered yoga mat. But maybe not. Maybe the story had finally folded into something livable. And if not, well, Buster was still here. The pasture was still mine. And I still had one last Frisbee left to throw.